Good afternoon. Thanks for attending my session. A few weeks back, Wells Fargo Bank called me for feedback on a new service I had used. So I work in customer experience analytics, and I understand how very few customers actually share feedback. So I gladly agreed. I spent over 5 minutes answering 30+ questions, but the questions never seemed to end. Finally lost patience, and I asked, "Are we there yet?" To which the person said, "We are almost halfway through it, so please bear with us some more time." That was the point. I abandoned the survey. So the funny part here is I actually enjoyed the service, and I had recommended it to colleagues, and it was a survey which had spoiled my experience. So brands get it wrong when in terms of delivering customer service or experience, or it could be well after delivery of the product. So that's where technology ideally should be an enabler, but in a lot of cases, it actually pulls down the experience. I like this quote from Steve Jobs where he says, "You got to start with the CX, customer experience, and work backward towards the technology, not the other way around." So I'm Ganes, I'm a co-founder and head of analytics at Gramener. I work with clients in helping them solve business challenges by presenting insights as stories. We use data analytics to identify insights and information design to tell them as stories. We work with 100+ clients, and we help them apply analytics and adopt it organization-wide. I'm passionate about simplifying data science. I write and speak, and I strive to make it accessible for a wider audience. With that, let's dive into today's session. We'll be talking about how you can transform your brand's customer experience with the help of technology and data. What's with the AI here? It's a cool term thrown around a lot. It can mean almost anything. I like this distinction. If it's written in Python, maybe it's machine learning. If it's written in PowerPoint, it's definitely AI. So you can rest assured that we'll talk about AI today. I'd like to begin with a story. You might have guessed from my accent that I'm from India. This is an ancient Indian fable. Once there were 6 blind men in a village. They had never encountered an elephant all their lives. So once when they actually got a chance to come across an elephant on the road, they got pretty excited. So they quickly scrambled around the elephant and started touching it. The first person who was touching its tusk said, "I finally know what an elephant is like. It is like a sharp spear." The second person who was touching its trunk said, "You're wrong. It's like a giant snake." Third person who was touching its ears said, No, you both are wrong. It's like a big fan." Fourth person touching its body said, "It's like a big wall." The fifth person who was holding its leg said, "It's as round as a tree trunk." And the final person who was touching its tail said, "Are you all crazy? I'm the only person who understood what an elephant is like. It's like a big rope." What's the takeaway from this story? Organizations have departments fighting over each other in terms of understanding what the customer really wants. So each of them is right. They have their own bias. They view the customers from their world, but they don't see the other person's perspective. As a result, all of them miss the elephant in the room. So customer experience today is siloed. Organizations have departments that don't talk to each other. People have myopic view of the customer. They get judgmental based on the last interaction. They get very transactional. They don't look at the holistic picture of the customer. What are the preferences of the customer? What will make them happy? What did we learn about them in the last year? As a result, they take a lot of decisions based on gut feel. It's not based on data. All of this leads to the customer feeling indifferent and feeling ignored, which leads to lost opportunities. This happens every day. If you look at our own experiences, if you're not happy with the cable channels you're seeing on TV, we call up customer service. First, we are greeted by a bot. It's a huge frustration. We really look for an avenue to talk to an operator. After a few minutes of getting all the details, you might finally get a chance. But then the person asks for all the details again. And then when you give the request, they say, "You'll have to talk to the billing department." They make a transfer. And then you're switched department to department. And finally, when you get frustrated with all of this and say, I want to cancel my service, they give you a number and say, please talk to the retention department, they'll help you out. So customer experience is broken. I like to equate CX as constant experimentation. We need to try various avenues to connect and understand the customer. We might make mistakes, but we collect data and we can get better the next time. Today, we'll see 5 simple steps on how you can understand the customer and transform their experience. Step 1 is to just listen to the customer. The biggest complaint we hear when we talk to marketing teams is that we don't have enough data about the customer. All we get is a spreadsheet of data. Where do we find more details? We want more granular information. But if you put yourself into the shoes of the customer, if you're happy about something, what do? You pick out your phone and you tweet about it. If you're very unhappy, you might vent your frustrations on some review website. If you love some content, you visit it again and again on your laptop, mobile. All of these are vital cues to the brand on what customers like, how are the preferences changing. We need to listen to all of this. And there are several avenues, we just need to be creative about it. Even on Google search, the terms as you search for something, there are some auto-suggest phrases. That is based on what millions of customers are interested in right now. By the way, a quick tip for you. I was searching for inbound here in our location, and the topmost hit there was inbound pizza, even higher than inbound marketing. So, and then I figured out that inbound pizza is a store not very far from here. So you can find out what customers really want, what is at the top of the mind. So you could look at voice of customer surveys, social media. There are tons of avenues today. That's where technology can help us. Specifically, we need to look for 3 types of feedback. First, direct feedback. Hear from the horse's mouth. Voice of customer surveys, one-on-one interviews, hear directly from them. Or indirect feedback, where customers talk about your brand, but they talk about it in third-party websites on social media. And finally, inferred is the subtle feedback which customers leave, the digital traces they leave on the websites, which page they visit after they land on your homepage. Or even other more subtle feedback, like if people use Uber Eats and you're ordering something, you can find out what location people are at and what are their preferences, what do they like to have for dinner. So all of these are inferred feedback which the customer doesn't directly tell you. So here a point of caution. You need to really decide how far and how close you get to the customer. It's important to get close to the customer, but don't get too close. Lest you creep out the customer. There are so many instances of banner ads following you all through the website. Anyone likes that? No. There are so many cases where we don't tell the brand and they start advertising that to us. We hate it. So we'll have to see where we need to draw the line. And emphasis on data before you can do data analytics. This might sound funny and obvious, but customers miss it all the time. We had a huge enterprise reaching out to us saying, we want AI to predict next 3 months financial parameters. So they asked, can you do it for us? We said, sure. What data do you have? So we have last month's data. We said, okay, what else? I said, that's it. We have last month's data. Can you predict the next 3 months using your AI? So we had to explain that you would have a lot of Excel sheets of data, financial parameters available. So why don't you use that? To which they said, we have all of the data, but we don't have it organized. We don't want to spend the next 3 months doing that. We want to apply AI because someone told us that it can help us predict well. So that's something which we need to educate customers about. There is almost an hierarchy of data science. You start with collection, whether it is point of sale data or sensors, IoT. Make sure you collect the data, store it in your database or data stores. And then you need to clean the data after it is stored in a place. And this is another common mistake. People assume that once the data is stored somewhere, you can directly apply analytics. You need to clean it because there's a lot of junk which gets accumulated within the data. And once you have all of that done, you can start doing the basic pattern spotting. Identify what do Excel pivots, what can you find from simple reporting. Business intelligence reporting falls into this category. And then we can start applying machine learning algorithms to find what are some deeper patterns. And finally, AI and deep learning comes into picture, where you can do some deep analytics and look much farther into the future. After having listened to the customer, the second important step is to understand the customer. There was a research interesting finding where it said if you have 10 likes, Facebook likes about a person, you can tell what the preferences are even better than a colleague at work. If you have 70 likes, you know the person better than their best friend. 150 likes, even better than a sibling. 300 likes, and you know them better than the spouse. A few hundred more, then you know them even better than what they might want themselves. So that's the creepy zone. So it's important to analyze and find what you can from the data. Data has an unreasonable effectiveness. You need to gather insights from data. Start with the obvious ones, numbers. When you ask for satisfaction, customers tell, I'm extremely satisfied or unsatisfied, so you have it on a scale of 1 to 10. That's one number for you. You have so many other numbers you can gather. Go beyond the numeric data, find out what you can find from text. So there is the unstructured feedback, free-flowing comments customers usually write. There was this recent model released by OpenAI. They had trained this AI model on millions of Wikipedia pages. With that learning, without any other human input, it was able to write articles at the level of quality of New York Times. People couldn't differentiate it. And it got so powerful that they did not release the code. They said this is a model which is too dangerous to be made public. So that is the power of text. And beyond numbers and text, there are so many other unstructured data types, such as audio clippings, video files. You have call center conversations stored and it's sitting somewhere in archives. Or you have video feeds, the CCTV feeds. All of these are very useful signals which a decade back were not considered useful, but now when you apply AI onto these, that's the kind of data which the AI is really good at. So how do you get started with analytical techniques? So you should not directly jump in and look at the most powerful ones. You need to start with asking the right business questions. What questions do you ask of data? That determines the quality of your insights. Start with the basic descriptive ones, the backward-looking ones asking, what happened to my satisfaction the last month? And then get deeper, asking, why did the satisfaction go down in North America last month? And then you can get into crystal ball gazing, look at the predictive insights, and ask questions such as, what is my NPS, Net Promoter Score, likely to be the next quarter? And then you really get into the prescriptive mode of analytics, where you play the role of an advisor to the business teams. You not only find insights from data, but you also tell them what they need to do, what action they have to take. That's the distinction between prescriptive and predictive. Most analysts and most people who do analytics today, they stop at the level 3. They say, I've found a great insight, now you take it and do whatever you want. That bridging of gap is essential. So we need to scale this, start with the simple descriptive ones, but we need to slowly move up the maturity level. So with that, we've looked at listening to the customer and understanding the customer. What do we do next? We need to put this feedback into the right perspective. So we would have looked at a lot of different feedback where customers talk about onboarding, they talk about features, they talk about how likely they are to buy again. Not all of these have the same importance. We need to put it into the same level of put it into the right priority. How do you do that? Let's take an example of this customer feedback. This is a person who has used a mobile app and has given this feedback. So I'll read it out. I love the product features and super quick onboarding, but the great experience did not continue while using your product. Your support teams have been helpful, but I'm not sure whether I'll buy again. So the customer talks about a variety of things. So how do you place this, and what action do you need to take? A useful framework for that is this 6-step customer journey. Most products, most brands have this. So when a customer hears about a particular product or a brand, they do the discovery and they start doing some research around it. And then they collect details in order to make a decision. That's where we get into the second stage of trying to select and make a purchase decision. Once they decide, then there is an onboarding phase. And then whenever they encounter issues, they reach out to customer support and get it resolved. And then there is a product usage phase, which hopefully should be the longest. And finally, we have the repurchase or reorder stage. Once they're done with that, they need to decide what next, or should they buy the product again. So this standardized journey step is pretty useful. You can customize it a little bit, but when you look at the flow of a customer, you need to place them in this journey step. So now let's look at how you can do that. There are several ways to place feedback onto the journey step. It could be based on customer. When you have new customer versus an existing customer, there's an easy way to distinguish, so directly separate them. Or it could be based on the channel. There is customer feedback coming in through the call center, which means you can be sure what stage it is already falling into. But when both of these are not sufficient, you need to look at the content. The content is extremely important, has a lot of details about it, the data and the metadata. So this is where you need to apply analytics and then find out what is the customer really talking about, which journey step does it fall into. Let's take the same example, the same feedback we just saw, and if we have to place this feedback into the 6 journey steps, how do we do it? Firstly, we separate and split this into 5 fragments rather here. So we have customers talking about different aspects. When you separate the fragments, then you can start placing them. The first one is talking about the identify feature, loving the product features. Second one is where the customer was onboarded, the experience was good. The usage of product, this is where the next stage we are talking about, has not been great. And then the customer is talking about dealing with issues and reorder. So there are 5 different aspects the customer is talking about in this one feedback. So now when you have this, we can start finding whether the customer was happy or unhappy about each of these. There are 3 fragments the customer seems to be happy about. One, they're unhappy, the other is in between. If we just do a simple math of mostly positive feedback, you might say that this is above average and be happy about it, but no. When you look at the journey steps, it says that the customer has not been happy about usage of the product, which is an important one, and they are iffy about the reorder phase, which is extremely important for the brand. So the 2 most important ones which matter to the brand more than anything else, the customer is not happy about. So this is the revelation that you get when you start splitting it into customer journey steps. So now we have completed 3 steps. We have placed each of this feedback. We have the different buckets. We have feedback coming in from different channels, and each interaction of the customer we have neatly identified, stored, and we have placed it into perspective. But for you to take a decision about the customer, you need to look at it in totality. You need to look at the integrated experience. This is extremely important. Why? Let's look at an example. So we have companies trying to optimize each touch point. So they have a contact center, they have onboarding stage, they try and take a lot of actions to improve each touch point. Wherever there's problem reported, they deep dive into that. And even if you improve each touch point to a 85 to 90% level, it may not be sufficient. You might assume falsely that the customer should be happy, but the net satisfaction figuratively is the product of all of these individual values, in which case it drops down to 60%. So you had it, each one improved, you spent a lot of effort trying to improve every single aspect, but net, the customer is not happy. So how do you roll up the feedback and find out where action is needed? It's not very easy. You have different channels and the context is completely different. When you ask a certain question in voice of customer survey, they actually respond and give specific feedback, whereas in Twitter, no one knows what is in the customer's mind. A lot of times people talk about products, you have to distinguish whether it is a word or it's a noun. So it's so difficult. So you need to first see how we can normalize the feedback. You might have a 5-point rating or a 10-point rating. How do you normalize that? How do you aggregate the feedback? So you need to roll it up. You have feedback coming in from thousands of customers. There are customers who talk about 3-4 channels. There are other customers who talk about a lot more. What is a common point that you can look at? So you need to aggregate it to look at all products together or a complete geography or maybe a channel. There are different logical points you can aggregate, roll up all of it, then you can start identifying what does it say. There's still a lot of manual effort involved. In spite of the analytics, the number crunching that you can do, you will have to infer and find out what the feedback really is about. So that's where spotting patterns manually and coming up with a headline is still relevant. Let's take an example. Let us say that a brand has launched their summer collection and they are looking out for feedback. So there's customers who have come to the store who say that the summer collection did not interest them. They give feedback in the store survey. From the competitive survey, the brand finds out that there's a rival brand which seems to be doing better because of probably the features they have in the colors of certain ranges. In social media, customers are even more vivid. They talk about why they're disappointed with a particular brand, and you get more signals there. And then when you look at the revenue numbers and market share, you get details as to the market share has dropped 2.5% last month. When you combine all of these signals together, roll it up and do all those, the techniques we talked about, we can come up with a headline like this. Our summer collection didn't land well. Brand B scored on vibrancy. Poor feedback led to 2.5% market share loss. So this is a headline which is actionable. You have stitched together all the signals. You're not running in separate directions based on feedback coming in from one channel. This is the power of integrated customer experience and finding out the aggregated takeaway. So what we need to do, we need to look across channels. We need to see what customers are talking about in different forums and across the different types of feedback, whether it is customer feedback, product survey, or competitive survey. Also look at what are the other channels telling you, and then you start combining them all together. You have the quantitative aggregation, you have the qualitative one. When you come up with all of this, you would be able to stand up and say that this is what we have found, this is where you need to act. So we've looked at 4 steps so far: listening to the customer, understanding, putting it into perspective, and finally talking about integration. At this stage, most analysts do a high five saying that we've really figured out what the customer is talking. We have the deepest, the greatest insight. But unfortunately, that is the reason why a lot of projects fail, a lot of data science projects fail, because people stop at insight and they don't go beyond that into explaining and communicating the insight to the audience who needs to act on it. So you might have heard of this phrase, the quote saying, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, did it make a sound? So this is quite like that. You've got the greatest of insights, but if no one understands it and no one takes a decision out of it, did it make any difference? A lot of efforts could have been wasted. Gartner says that half of data science projects never get deployed because of bad storytelling. So storytelling is extremely important. How do you convert insights into stories? First, you need to visualize the insights. Convert numbers into pictures. Come up with charts, representations which can help you portray the insights in a manner that everyone can understand. Instead of looking at a table of numbers, the human brain is wired to look at pictures. Convert them into visuals. But that is not sufficient. A lot of people equate data visualization to storytelling, but they are not the same. Data visualization, when you add narrative to it and you bring in context, those 3 elements are required to convert insight into a story. So you need to find what are those right ways that you can bring in the narrative context, come up with a headline, and provide a background saying this is what happened and this is why you need to take a certain decision. And finally, make sure that any insight you communicate is actionable. Can the company act on it? Can it be changed? And what is the progress period over period? So that will help you place this into perspective. And let's look at an example. Let's say we have looked at thousands of customer feedback. We've understood which journey step it falls into. We understand the sentiment for every journey step. And we also have done analytics to find out how important is a journey step. We have an overall customer satisfaction rating, and we have the rating for each of those journey steps. And now when you do the impact analysis, you can find out of these 6, which of these is contributing most to my overall satisfaction. You can find that tells you the relative importance. And we are going to plot this here visually. So we have the impact on satisfaction on the y-axis. Anything at the top is a high impact journey step. Anything on the right hand side is a positive sentiment, left is a negative sentiment. So we have placed the journey steps here. The 6 journey steps have been placed here. The size is based on customer feedback. Not everyone talks about pricing. A lot more people might be talking about customer support. So it's useful to bring that into the equation. So now you have 3 journey steps which seem to be important. Buy, which is the one at the top, is the most important. A lot of customers are talking about it. And it has the biggest impact on the overall satisfaction. The bubble which is the biggest here is customer service. Understandably, a lot of people have reported issues there, and that's why the sentiment is also negative. It is on the left hand side. High impact, but customers are unhappy. Identify, discovery is the stage, is the journey step which is positive. Generally customers are happy about it and it is important enough. The other 3, customize, reorder, use, are low in importance. Now if you look at how are we doing it period over period, that brings another input here. It says that the buy journey step has improved in sentiment. It has moved from left to right, whereas the customer service has gone up in importance, but people are unhappy about it. So it's rising up. A lot of people are deciding their overall satisfaction based on this, but they're not happy about it. It's an alarm sign for the organization. So with this, if we have to decide on actions, we need to improve on service that needs attention. Maintain the identify and buy stages because they're doing good and they continue to be important. Customize is becoming less important. So now you can see how we have tied everything together. We've placed it in perspective, visualized it, and have given specific actions to the teams. So those are the 5 steps. Let me talk through a case study to explain how we had implemented this for a large technology major in the US. So this was a player who had set up a mature net promoter score framework of measuring customer satisfaction. So they had different teams measuring the satisfaction and they were acting on the scores. And the need was to see how they can improve the NPS overall and how they can tie it back to the revenue to see how they can grow the revenue. So firstly, this was set up as a central team with executive mandate because we are trying to break the silos. So there's a common team which cuts across all the teams, sales, marketing, product, social media, and all of these teams came together to come up with a common joint customer advocacy team. And then these are the steps we followed. Define the business objectives. What drives customer satisfaction? In this case, net promoter score was there. And then we went beyond that to define what are those aspects that are important. How do you measure it? How do you break down the net promoter score at the next level? And then you come up with the solution framework and ask the questions. Start with the right business questions. And then you bring in the relevant analytics. In this case, we brought in text analytics to look at what the customers are talking about, sentiment, and then we also deployed deep learning. I talked about some of the OpenAI kind of models. We deployed some models to understand and get deeper signals from the text. And then we rolled all of this up into integrated experience. And then we had the storytelling part where we created an interactive suite of visual data science application, which every user could come in and they had their own login, which told details about their view of their geography or their segment. How is it doing? How does it map back to the overall satisfaction? And then we set up the ROI and we tried measuring period over period. How is the net promoter score changing? What is the impact of this change on the revenue numbers? So we were able to achieve a 4.5 points increase in net promoter score, translating to incremental revenue of $45 million. So when you tie the satisfaction to the revenue, the customer experience, revenue analytics, you will be able to pin a number to it, which makes it all the more important, and you will be able to justify the spend on improving your satisfaction levels. So I'll show you a couple of quick visuals on the storytelling layer we had. So this one shows the different journey steps. So we have 9 journey steps here, and each journey step we have the importance measured. Like I mentioned, each journey step has a certain importance based on how it contributes to the overall satisfaction score. So now we have this ranked quarter 1 to quarter 4. The one at the first top is customer service. So you can see now with the interactive one, it shows that the customer service is number 1, has stayed number 1. Reorder and brand discovery have switched places a couple of quarters back and continue to be important. And there are few others which are moving up and down. When you have this kind of a perspective, you will be able to visually say that these journey steps have moved up this quarter. Suddenly they have become more important. And then the next step is to tie this back onto the revenue. So we have understood the satisfaction and sentiment. How does it drive the revenue? So how many of you are familiar with this representation? A quick show of hands. Okay. So let me explain, not many people. So this is technically called the chord diagram. You don't have to worry about the name of the chart. On the left hand side, what you have is the quarter 2 rating. On the right hand side is the quarter 4. So we have the split up of customers into promoter, passive, detractor, and not responded. So you have the left hand side having a certain mix, and on the right hand side, the recent survey, the mix has changed. You see, the quick takeaways are the people who have not responded, that slice is growing bigger. A lot more people have not responded this time. And when you further click on that, it tells you where this segment comes from. A lot of promoters have stopped responding. You can see that the connection between those 2 layers. And similarly, how many of the passives and detractors have not responded. And then similarly, you can also find out what happened to the detractors from last time. Last time we had a certain mix of detractors. Many of those people have stopped responding, which is also a danger sign, because last time they were vocal about their dissatisfaction. Now they're not talking about it. Have they already churned, or are they about to churn? So you can start getting a lot of details about it in terms of how is the mix changing. And the revenue impact, which comes in hover, I don't have it here. It talks about the revenue growth for each of these slices. You have say 5,000 customers who have moved from detractor to not responded. You find out the revenue for them last time versus this quarter, and that tells you what is the revenue growth. And what we found was, understandably, a lot of the people who are moving between promoter to promoter, the revenue average was about 50% plus was the revenue growth, which was much higher than the company average. What was surprising was, compared to the revenue growth of detractors, either staying detractors or detractors becoming promoters, a lot of detractors who became passive, the revenue growth was very high. It was almost 60%. So that was unusual, and then that led to further analysis to find what happens when detractors turn passive, and what was that experience of those people which made them buy more. How can we convert those people into promoters? So all of this makes it easy to, and with this we were able to demonstrate the ROI I mentioned. We'll do a quick recap. The 5 steps we've looked at: listen to the customer, 3 modes of feedback we talked about: direct, indirect, and inferred, or the non-obvious feedback. Data before AI. Understand the customer, look at the different data types, come up with the right business questions before you touch analytics. Put it into right perspective. The 6 journey steps we looked at, that is a very useful framework. Integrate all of this feedback, roll it up, and come up with an overall headline for the business that the leaders can act upon. And finally, promote action through storytelling. Insights as stories is the final link to make this successful. So with that, I'll close the session. I would like to close with a quote that the dissatisfied customers are the biggest source of learning for a brand. Technology can be a very strong enabler in listening to the customers, particularly the dissatisfied ones. Make use of technology and data and listen to them to transform their experience. Thank you.